Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a really powerful philosophical idea that might just completely flip how you see the world. It's called the Parallax View, and it asks us to stop looking for one single solid truth, and instead to find truth in a place you'd never expect, the gap between two totally conflicting points of view. So let's just kick things off with the big, brain-bending question at the heart of all this. What if changing your perspective doesn't just give you a new angle on something? What if it actually changes the thing itself? I know, it sounds a little out there, but just keep that idea in your back pocket, because it's the key to everything we're about to unpack. To really get this, we have to start with our baseline, our default setting, what you might call a one-dimensional reality. This is just the normal, everyday world that feels solid, simple, and is just kind of there. We don't really question it. The philosopher Herbert Marcuse put it perfectly. He said, "The reality principle speaks in mass." What he meant is that our sense of what's real isn't really our own. It's shaped by this massive, booming chorus of outside voices. The media we consume, our jobs, society in general. They're all singing the same tune. And that tune creates one single, flattened out version of reality. And this leads to what Marcuse called a one-dimensional society. It's a world where all the sharp edges, all the different ways of thinking, all the dissent, it all gets smoothed over. It's a reality with no contrast, where even questioning the way things are just gets folded back into the system, making the status quo seem like the only possible way things could be. So, how do you even begin to break out of that? Well, Marcus says we need to learn a new skill, something he calls negative thinking. This is our first real step, our first attempt to peek behind the curtain of that smooth, one-dimensional world. And this leads us to this wild quote from Hegel that Marcuse just loved. That, quote, "that which is cannot be true." Now, I know, on the surface, that sounds completely nuts. How can what is not be true? But what he's getting at is that the world as it first appears to us, that immediate, simple, one-dimensional reality, is actually incomplete. It might even be hiding what's really going on. And that's the absolute key here. To really understand things, we can't just take the world at face value. We have to train ourselves to go behind the curtain. We have to start looking for the hidden tensions, the contradictions, all the invisible forces that are shaping what we see, but are kept just out of sight. All right, so that brings us to our first major perspective shift. We're going to look at ideology. We're moving away from that flat, simple view and starting to see how big, abstract systems of thought can totally warp the reality that's sitting right in front of our faces. Karl Marx had a term for this. He called it speculative construction. It's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Just imagine a philosopher who gets so obsessed with the abstract idea of fruit, with a capital F, that he starts to think that abstract concept is more real than actual apples or pears or bananas. He's mixing up the label for the real thing. And this quote from Marx just nails it. He's asking, what's the big mystery that the intellectuals of his time are all wrapped up in? Is it the real mystery of why people are poor or why there's injustice? Nope. He says it's mystery in abstracto, the abstract idea of mystery. Ideology makes us chase these conceptual ghosts, and it distracts us from the real, messy, concrete problems of the world. Okay, so Marx showed us how ideology can make us fall in love with an abstract idea more than with reality. But what happens if you push that idea to its absolute breaking point? What if the abstractions don't just distort reality, but completely replace it? Well, to answer that, we have to jump into the wild, dizzying world of Jean Baudrillard. Baudrillard lays out this kind of decay of the real in 4 stages. Let's walk through it. So, step 1. A sign, like a picture, just reflects a basic reality. A simple photo of a tree is a tree. Easy. Step 2. The sign starts to mask or warp that reality. Think a heavily edited, photoshopped image. Then, stage 3. The sign starts to hide the fact that there is no basic reality underneath it anymore. And finally, stage 4. The sign has zero connection to any reality at all. It's a pure simulation, a copy of something that never had an original. It's like a map that has totally replaced the territory. And as Baudrillard says, the result is that we end up living sheltered by signs in the denial of the real. We're just floating in a sea of perfect copies, pristine models, and flawless images of things that maybe never even existed to begin with. Welcome to what he calls hyper-reality. And it's not just fake, it's a world that feels more real than real. It's that constant, nonstop fire hose of media, data, and simulations that we experience every single day, and we mistake it for the real thing. So, after that whirlwind tour through one-dimensional thinking, ideology, and getting lost in the simulation, where on earth do we find the truth? Well, this brings us to the grand finale of our explainer, Slavoj Žižek's concept of the parallax view. Now, in physics, parallax is super simple. You can do it right now. Hold your thumb out, close one eye, and look at it. Now switch eyes. See how your thumb seems to jump? That's parallax. Žižek grabs that simple idea and turns it into a powerful philosophical tool. He says the truth isn't what you see with your left eye, and it's not what you see with your right eye. The real insight is in the jump itself, that uncrossable gap between the two perspectives. So, let's put this into practice. Imagine you have two views. On one side, there's the view from ideology, a neat, tidy, systematic explanation for how the world works. And on the other side, you have your own messy, chaotic, contradictory lived experience. The parallax insight isn't about picking a winner. It's about staring right into the gap between them and realizing that the fact that they cannot be squared up, that gap itself is the truth. Žižek uses the death of Christ as this incredibly powerful example. From one perspective, you see a divine sacrifice full of profound meaning for all of humanity. But if you shift to the parallax view, you see something totally incompatible, the brutal, ugly political reality of a state execution. For Žižek, the deepest truth of that event isn't found in picking one story over the other. It's in confronting that unbridgeable gap between the divine plan and the brutal reality. So, at the end of the day, here's what the parallax view really tells us. Truth isn't some hidden gem waiting for us behind a curtain, and it's definitely not about finding the one correct perspective that explains everything. The truth is the gap, the void, the impossible contradiction that opens up when we force ourselves to jump from one viewpoint to its polar opposite. That shift, that feeling of vertigo you get when you jump, that is the insight. And that really just leaves us with one final question to think about. If the truth is really in the gap, then where in your own world, in your job, in your beliefs, in your relationships, where do you need to shift your perspective to finally see what's really there?